Ever- Well, this is a great sign of actually why you now imagine that newscasters, like if the newscast starts and that they're sipping from their coffee, there's probably nothing in there because when you actually do that for real, bad things can happen. Everybody, welcome to this the let's just say nth or nth plus one conversation that I have gotten to have with my friend Sal. Today's conversation is going to be Sal grilling me on all sorts of things. I've been looking forward to this for weeks. It's what we were supposed to do in our last meeting, but then we pivoted into that thing where we talked about that the document that I had posted on the debate evolution subreddit. Sal, you were very kind to let me pivot to that. But now I've been so excited about this. Have at it.
Well, actually, you know way more about me than I do about you, just because I was on the other end of this for like the last 4 or 5 episodes, and that was fine. I was delighted to talk, and we built a friendship. I hope I've been able to introduce you to some of my creationist colleagues whom you didn't know, um, and I'm happy to see whatever I could do. The the reason I'm going to be asking some questions at first is I actually haven't figured out quite what you're trying to achieve.
Mm. Mm.
You've stated it, and so I'm going to give my take, and then you correct me if I'm misunderstanding.
Sense of very wise
You're
way of putting it.
wanting young Earth creationists to not be young Earth creationists as much because you feel that their understanding of the evidence that they're not dealing with it. I would agree with you that many of them have terrible arguments. I'm a young Earth creationist, and for example, I know of 12 different creationist cosmologies trying to explain the distant starlight problem. Obviously, as a matter of principle, they can't all be right. It's possible they're all wrong. So that means at least 11 of the 12 are bad. And then we have multiple flood explanations for the flood model and radiometric dating. And I have watched this debate unfold for at least around 45 years. Now we're getting up to about 46 years. And I've seen some bad arguments and then some better ones come along. Some of the ones critical of evolution were actually terrible, like the second law of thermodynamics. I happen to have studied statistical mechanics and thermodynamics in graduate school. So even as young Earth creationist, I think I can speak authoritatively that those are bad arguments, and I cringe when I hear creationists use those. There are probably some other ones like accelerated nuclear decay. I had a graduate degree in physics, and I'm continuing on in my studies, and I'm just like, look, you're going to create lots of problems. At least admit that maybe you don't have a good model, and then that would move things along, because there's a saying, the first step in getting a cure or healing is to admit you have a problem. And so there are all these bad arguments that I still see persisting, and it's like, look, there are probably a lot of people on the fence, which I was a long time ago. They're just going to be turned off about it. And so I'm thoroughly with you on trying to give. I wouldn't try to say stop being a young Earth creationist, but I would say stop using bad arguments to bolster your beliefs. If you have to say, I don't know, but my intuition says this is still the right way to go, I would consider that progress. So we're definitely on board in saying, we should get rid of bad arguments. And, but I don't necessarily think we have to make people stop being young Earth creationists to be able to do good science. Obviously, there are people who are former evolutionists who are top scientists that are young Earth creationists now. Marcos Eberlin comes to mind. There's also a geneticist named John Alquist. He published in Evolution. Now he's a young Earth creationist. Obviously, John Sanford. There are ex-atheists like John Gideon Hartnett, who's a very fine physicist, was not always a young Earth creationist. He was an atheist evolutionist, and then he converted. And then Russell Humphreys. So there's quite a number of young Earth creationists that were not homegrown in the church. I would say and this is anecdotal evidence, that about a third of the top researchers that I know were not were not creationists. A lot of them didn't even come from Christian homes. So, I mean, although in the United States it's kind of hard to think, it's for the older generation, a lot of them had at least been nominally cultural Christians. So I really never delved too deeply into their religious background unless they volunteered the information. So I knew a lot were like theistic evolutionists and all. So I just wanted to find out where, I mean, if you're just picking on bad young earth creationist arguments, I'm right there with you. Um, but I don't necessarily think that science is going to move forward by making them believe in evolution or believe in old earth. I think helping them just undo bad arguments would be a really good start.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would be right on board with that. So I wanted your
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah. So I appreciate you putting the question so baldly of what the devil is it that I'm trying to do here. People keep asking me this question, and I feel like if I were a better marketer, I would have a one sentence answer to this. But I don't know if in principle one should even have like a one sentence answer, a one level answer to this. I'll say that I'm trying to do a number of different things from these conversations. Some of them you will disagree with. Some of them you'll not share. Let me say, but some of them you will share. And if you are uncomfortable enough with the ones that we don't share, then I respect, right? Anyone's I never try to force people into these conversations or try to dissemble and trick people into conversations like this. So I'll say that right, the thing they're trying to do is have really enjoyable conversations with young Earth creationists of all different stripes, right? On the object level, that is what I'm trying to do, and that is you and I've been having a really great time doing that with you. I there's but like, why am I trying to do that? What is this a larger project? What is the larger project in which this is a part? There's this sort of societal level thing that I think of that I think you will agree with, and that is that society seems to be going mad right now, specifically because people are less and less able to listen and take seriously other arguments. People are, because of, increasingly personalized media and maybe some other things, they are more and more squirreling themselves away into their thought silos. And they are getting swept up in these big stories where the other teams are the implacable enemies. And they are willing to support really great evils in order to fight the evils on the other side. Um, this is terrifying, right? This is the sort of thing that keeps a lot of people up at night. And so from that vantage point, um, talking about young Earth creationism was, I think, the specific content of that conversation is not so very useful for dealing with those societal level problems. But trying to like beat out a method and a norm in communities of people who have this ability to talk across chasms, I think actually is one of the most important projects for everybody to be working on right now. And I think that they can be working on that. You have to have content with that, right? There has to be something that you are disagreeing about with other people. And the beautiful thing is the world is rich in possibilities here because there's so much to disagree about. And from this vantage point, from the societal vantage point, I happen to have this deep and desperate love toward thinking about various theories of creation and evolution and all of these things. So this is selfishly one that I am picking. That's at least one of three. Do you want to like pause at that and ask any questions about that?
Actually, that um, what I'm hearing, and if I could be mishearing, it, young Earth creationism just happened to be a topic where there was a battle that you fought. I mean that you not you, that you fought, but you noticed there was a battle brewing over the topic of young Earth creationism. but we could actually, in the discussion of origins, especially where there's a lot of uncertainty in the science, even if one were an atheist, there are sharp disagreements in origins theory, and I'm happy to. Being a young Earth creationist, I particularly am sensitive to see the battles going on where atheists fight other atheists and where evolutionists fight other evolutionists and origin of life researchers fight other origin of life researchers. I mean, when you see that just the animosity between them, I'm just like, this is kind of fun to watch because it's like you're seeing your opponents kind of devour themselves. Now, that's not the most noble thing to be entertained by, but I notice it. So I do think it may be terrifying to see. This is the biggest divide, obviously, between creationists and evolutionists. But if you see tribal behavior, it's all over the place, both in creationism and evolution. And there are people really defending their turf. Now, I just need to contrast that with well-established scientific disciplines. You don't have fierce arguments about basic accepted approximations. And I use the word approximation loosely because electromagnetic theory, classical electromagnetic theory, is technically an approximation, but it is so good that except for the really extreme cases like in quantum electrodynamics, etc., it can be taken almost as a given for everyday life. Oh wow!
Well, here, sorry, this is one of my two copies of Feynman's QED right there.
Well
Don't ask me how much of either of them that I've read. Sorry, do continue.
Okay, I won't ask you. Actually, for what it's worth, even at the graduate level, we only mention quantum electrodynamics in passing. This is how sophisticated it is that even the professors are like, no, I don't want to teach this. I mean, you'll be aware of it, but even classical electromagnetic theory is so difficult. The graduate students be saying, this is like a full-time job, trying to work on this, and much less kind of the deeper aspects of quantum mechanics. So I'm just saying where I was headed with this, you don't see tribal warfare over this. You do not see people arguing over that theory. So just for the reader's benefit, we wouldn't have generators and motors if we didn't believe in electromagnetic theory. The third, it's modern classical electromagnetic theories defined by Maxwell's equations. There are four of them. The third equation is the Faraday-Maxwell law, or Faraday's law of induction, which makes possible motors and generators. And you can imagine what life would be if we didn't have a means of generating electricity in large amounts without generators. Just think about the last time you had a power out. And if it's prolonged, that would be like, okay, this was life, your whole life. No substantive amounts of electricity. We don't have these tribal wars. And so I just wanted to point out where you have areas where there is uncertainty about what the truth is. This is where you're going to get huge battles. And I just, I just in what you said, I'm beginning to realize this is a lot deeper than young Earth creationism. It is maybe a policy to help people get along when there are uncertainties about what is actually true.
Yeah.
We are in a stage. I mean, if you ask evolutionists about the specifics of how things evolve and what the mechanism is, you'll see them start to subdivide in multiple camps. We're now, if you actually Google this, you'll see the first way was Darwinian evolution. The second way is neutral evolution, which is non-Darwinian. Now we have the third way. And I'm like, okay, and you're seeing all these groups fighting amongst themselves, but, they try to keep it from the public view because it kind of makes the theory not look as solid as electromagnetism. And I've asked people who defend evolutionary theory, is evolutionary theory as solid as electromagnetism? Of course, I'll laugh if they say, yes, it is. I'm just like, no, it's not. And I would just point to their side and I say, look, you guys can't even agree on the mechanism. You're up to the third way. Is there going to be a no way or fourth way? I mean, in fact, the third way is not even a unified theory if you look at it. So I'm just, I mean, I can understand why you pick young Earth creationism versus evolution, because that's the clear list. That is where the battle lines are most obvious and clearly defined. But you'll see as you get to know some of the historic battles out there that there's maybe not quite the level of bad blood, but there is bad blood even in the evolutionary community. Also in the atheistic community, um, oh my goodness. I mean, just the bile, the lawsuits and threats of physical violence to each other openly on the internet. And some of them involved men saying some really nasty things to the females out there. I'm just like, okay, for family friendly, I'm not going to go into specifics, but it was really nasty. And for a while, even the Christians were like, hey, we're glad they're picking on each other rather than us. They're giving us a break. So I just wanted to see if I'm characterizing this, that it's probably deeper than young earth creationism, but it's probably the most obvious one to start saying, can we start getting along, especially to the evolution colleagues. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I think so. We could talk, and I hope we do talk later about the claims that you made about Darwinian theory not being accepted anymore. I think I know some of the things you're talking about, but we can talk about those later. We're trying to clear the ground, my ultimate kind of goals right now. Yeah, let's just say that. Yeah, you totally do. I think soft shoe this. I don't emphasize as much that this is sort of my big goal, and I think that's probably a mistake of mine. I haven't in the past emphasized that this is my big goal because I worry that people who care a lot about this particular debate, as I do, will think that I'm using the debate for something else. And in some ways that's true. Um, but also like in some ways I just really love this debate and it's sort of embarrassing. It's embarrassing to me amongst my friends how invested and excited I am by the creationism evolution debate. All of my friends are like, that that like people cared about that 20 years ago. Right? Like nobody talks about this anymore. I'm like, I think it's actually still a really important thing. So sometimes I try to I try to lowball it or de-emphasize that. But yeah. But here then so let me speak to the other side of this, which is that I do think that this particular debate of creationism versus evolutionism or whatever we want to call this is actually really important. I think it's much more important than almost anybody else does. And one of those reasons is I think that when part of this is that I believe that the better, more accurate model of the world that we have, the better we tend to do in solving other problems. I know that a minute ago you cited some important scientists who've been doing important work who are not evolutionists, and I totally agree about that. Um, but I would disagree that science in general would be more productive if people switched over to being young Earth creationists. I think it'd be much less productive. Can't prove that. I have some. We could talk about that. I have some reasons for explaining why really good scientists tend to have counterintuitive views on things, non-mainstream views on things. I think that's actually a general truth about really good sciences. But then I think they also often have non-mainstream views on things that you and I would both say, oh, that's wrong. The thing that this like brilliant, Nobel Prize winning scientist thinks about this is wrong. And this is just something you get with great scientists sometimes. So I do think, sorry, this is all to say that I do think that general um, there's gains to be made in increasing human understanding, human abilities to reason by giving them a better, more accurate model of the world to work on. Never is that never is that more the case than in the field of education, where I think that we have been stuck in a century-long war between two types of education educational progressivism and educational traditionalism, only tangentially related to the political philosophies that share those names. Um, we've been stuck in a 100-year war between those two things because we have not integrated educational science with evolutionary science. I think that as we develop evolutionary models of education, we make education a lot better, a lot faster. Just for example, with that. So I think that there are gains to be made on a societal level from having people understand a truer model of the world. Um, and I think that there's also, if I can say this too, gains to be made in education, because I think that one of the major reasons that uh, a lot of mainstream science is stuck in these sorts of in this war is because most mainstream scientists are really bad science communicators. And they're very bad science communicators in part because they're too clever. These ideas have come too easily to them, and they do not understand what it actually takes to help somebody understand real scientific theories. I think this is also true in debating conspiracy theories, right? I was watching a YouTube video a couple days ago by the wonderful zoologist Clint Laidlaw, who does the what does he do? Clint's Reptiles. Um, I forget the name of his YouTube channel, but he was doing a masterful job of combating the chemtrail conspiracy theory, but then no one has ever done as good a job as he has done doing combating this. It was so beautiful. Tears are nearly brought to my eyes in this. But the one spot where he fell down is where he was explaining the mainstream theory of cloud formation. And he was using all of these abstractions and these quantifications, and he's like switching back and forth between Celsius and Fahrenheit. And I was not able to follow him at all, but I know how to teach clouds to people. I can teach cloud formation to people in just a few sentences that immediately clicks into their brains and allows them to see clouds in a new way, and then allows them to port that understanding to seeing why, of course, jet engines, when they get high enough in the atmosphere, are going to leave these contrails behind. It's super easy to do that once you know how to do this kind of educational work. And I'm interested in doing that kind of educational work inside of the creation evolution debate, because I think we can all become smarter when we get better at more clearly explaining our theories, whatever they are, on the other side, right? Like hydroplate theory on the young Earth creationism side versus plate tectonics on the mainstream side, mainstream geologist side. I think that both of these theories, when they're presented, are usually presented terribly, and I think we can state them clearly. I think we can state them in ways that stick in people's heads, and this is like my one skill in life is this skill, and I can take that and give it to people in these communities to help them communicate better with one another. Does that make sense? Maybe that's too nebulous.
No, that actually makes more sense. By the way, if you see me hurriedly typing and looking elsewhere, I'm trying to take notes.
Yeah, no,
And the way I
do
take
it too. Yeah,
my handwriting is so bad, even I can't read my own, and I'm not very fast, and so I'm a much faster typer. I'm
yeah.
not. So in case the audience is wondering why am I ignoring Brandon and just typing away, it's like, no, I'm actually taking notes. And I just want the audience to know I'm not disrespecting what you're saying. It's actually out of respect. I'm trying to type as fast as I can.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Ditto.
so I do, okay, just, I may have already mentioned this. I actually was involved in computer-based training. We made, in today's dollars, we probably spent I was part of a project. And sometimes I was actually the senior engineer on a project where we were training pilots, air crews in the mid 1990s in using modern weapons, particularly the U.S. Navy. Just for those aficionados, it'd be the the Harpoon anti-ship missile, the standoff land attack missile, the infrared Maverick, the HARM missile, high-speed anti-radiation missile from the platforms of the primarily the A6 Intruder, but also the FA-18 Hornet and a few Orion P3 Orions. So what did we do? We were training. We wanted to find a way to train combat air crews as fast as possible. The traditional classroom methods, what would take them maybe 1 or 2 months, we could do in 2 days. Now we spent, like in today's dollars, about $100 million developing these computer-based systems. And we were able to train them, and it was visually intensive. So it doesn't surprise me now to see people addicted to their cell phones and all sorts of visual media, because the human mind can process visual. And whenever something is highly tailored to someone, to where they are, where the computer could diagnose where their weaknesses are or where they're misunderstanding, it's just like getting a private tutor. We found the air crews were learning so fast. And, some of them would have only 2 days to start working with a new weapon system, and you're off to combat. Usually that's not a desirable situation, but military aviation has gotten so complex with all the things they have to keep track of now, and all the new technological developments. So I have seen we might have to rethink how we do education just overall. I have known it personally because I used to study the old textbook method. But when I went to the graduate school at the FAES NIH, oh my goodness, I had a professor give a 3-hour lecture. He showed 300 slides, and I said, I've never learned so fast in my life. I went from 0 to 100, just boom. And like, you would have not known that I really had up until that point, I had actually no organic or biochemistry background, but he spooled me up so fast, and it was so well tailored. I like, if I had studied traditional textbooks where they just make you memorize tables, I wouldn't have gotten the overall picture, able to connect the dots. So I'm with you on that. Where I have to strenuously disagree is this thing about believing in evolution to be able to facilitate science. I actually think people learn science the bad way. It's horrible that they get stuff shoved down their throat. Reminds me of what it was like in church, where you never were able to ask questions and actually learn. And then I find out, that they weren't teaching us well to begin with. So if I could show what I consider real science, I'm going to share my.
Can I actually repeat back what I'm hearing from you right now? Because I think we might agree more than you think on this, but I want to check on this.
Sure, please.
I'm hearing you. So a moment ago, I said that I think that helping people understand evolution, by which I mean here, like evolution and like the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old, right? The whole sort of mainstream scientific model, that is in fact helpful for having people, act in the world, do science properly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you heard from that all that, maybe something like all that matters, what mostly matters is like us, like cramming this down their throat and just to get them get the truth in them so that they can do the best science. Is that how you heard me say that, or what you were reacting to?
Yeah, I was, the way I understood it is they're going to be, if they all accept evolution, they're going to be better scientists. And I cannot agree with that, because evolutionists can't even agree on what their theory actually claims, except for like universal common ancestry, and it just happened without God. That's about even if you're a theistic evolutionist, they'll say all this happened by natural processes. That's about all I hear. They actually never prove it. They never actually, if I may show what I think is real science, I'm going to share it right here, because this is what I had to study in graduate school. This is my screen here. And thank you. This is the starting point of science right here. we talked about Maxwell's equations. We would not have the modern day world without this. Now, you don't have to necessarily understand the math. We could go through here and I could tell you, okay, without equation number 3 in Maxwell's equation, so there are 5 major laws of physics. And I could go through here and say, these are all the technologies that are driven by this. And the problem that I have is they keep talking about Darwin and natural selection. And one, I know of evolutionists, Masatoshi Nei. I used his work in graduate school. He said Darwin never proved his theory. Does that ever come out in the textbooks? And he's a national account. He was recognized. And I see articles like this. I'm like, okay, public face evolutionary, for lack of a better word, propagandists will kind of hide these conflicts and say they're minimal. I'm like, no, they're not. And you pretend you have a unified front when you're actually very fragmented and disagree. And I said, well, shouldn't kids have access to a top scientist, a top evolutionary biologist, one whose work is recognized by graduate students in evolutionary biology? Some of them are acquainted with it because I had to submit my assignments using his molecular evolutionary genetics algorithm or something, MEGA, in a graduate level bioinformatics class. And I'm like, okay, so why aren't kids aware of this, that Darwin's theory has failed according to this man? Isn't that fair to have it shoved down your throat that they have to understand natural selection and how it evolved things? I'm just like, I have a real problem with that because I happen to know that that's not the case among themselves, but not to the public and not in their textbooks. So the stuff that you see in the textbooks that they're trying to teach, like the NCSE, it's like, no, that doesn't even agree with the latest research. And what if I said, okay, the number one evolutionist on the planet who has the highest H index by far is Eugene Koonin. He wrote a paper in 2013 that said the dominant mode of evolution is gene loss. He said the dominant genome reduction is the dominant mode of evolution. I'm just like, okay, so how does evolution work if the dominant mode is gene loss? How do you build a complex organism? He never explains exactly how that works in detail. I mean, he may claim that we sort of understand it, but that can be totally picked apart. So, I'm just like, okay, so why does this why are we wasting time on stuff that's not proven? They may accept it, but that's far from being proven. I'd say it's accepted as a matter of faith, where we don't understand, the importance of major scientific developments like Faraday's law of induction. That is way more important to understand electricity, to understand magnetism, and then say quantum mechanics. Now, we don't have to go in the details of it, but we wouldn't understand chemistry if it weren't for quantum mechanics. That it led to, the beginnings of quantum mechanics began with atomic theory. I mean, that's, and then we started to see the periodic table. I'm just like, that is way more important. So I don't see how getting people to accept that things evolved is that important. Now, if you want to say, oh yeah, they have to believe that the universe, that life is billions of years old. It's like, how does that change anything? How does that change anything as far as learning basic science? Because I know when I deal with evolutionary biologists, I know way more about basic science than they do. Some of them, to claim to understand evolution of organisms, I know way more about protein biology than they do. I'm just like, did you guys ever even study this? So I'm sorry, this is where it really gets me upset to hear that they're going to get better at understanding science. I'm like, no, they're going to get better at understanding science when they study the basics. Evolutionary theory isn't even a basic science. It is a speculative claim. So
Sure.
Sorry to tee off, but now you got me actually disagreeing with you.
Well, good. Thank you. And I'll try to work to sort of de-tribalize this so we can discuss this calmly on this. But I accept and respect your frustration in this. And thank you for not trying to stifle that or hide that also. when I react the same way in the future, I trust that you'll offer me the same acceptance of that as I have. Um, uh, I think that here. So let me start by trying to repeat the gist of what you've said. Um, trying to find the core of it right now. That one of the pieces of this is that evolution, you're saying, is not one of the fundamentals. Therefore, it is not important to teach it. Is that a thing that you're saying? Maybe it's not the absolute core of it,
It,
but is that a,
it is important. I would encourage young Earth creationists to study it. They don't have to believe it, but it doesn't even need to occupy a lot. I know many, this may be shocking, but a lot of evolutionary biologists are very upset. Many medical doctors don't believe in the theory of evolution. And some of
I
them are
was
very
talking to
fond.
one. I was talking to one this week. Yeah, doctor at an important research university. Yeah,
And I'm just like, okay, so I can understand that you might be concerned that I say never teach it, but I'd be fine if we taught it and said, look, there are a lot of uncertainties here, and not every scientist believes it. They disagree among themselves. A lot of the language of biology is framed in evolution, whether you believe it or not. Uh, um, you have to at least be acquainted with the language, and so I'm fine with that because that's how I had to learn biology. I had to kind of pinch my nose and say, oh, this is disgusting, but I'm going to be knowledgeable in this. And so I would just say, look, if they put a qualifier and said this is not widely accepted, there's scientists like Nobel Prize winner Richard Smalley or Sir Ernst Chain who disbelieved in evolution, I would be fine with that. You would get them to study it more, and maybe some of them will convert, and I'm fine with that in terms of their freedom. But at least they got a fair chance and got a, you know, um, had it represented. I would be very um, not okay with equating the level of verification for evolutionary theory with operational sciences like quantum mechanics, electrodynamics, even classical mechanics, celestial mechanics. It's not the same. To put them on the same level is not. It's not accurate. And if I have to say this, even Jerry Coyne, who's a famous evolutionary biologist who wrote the book Why Evolution is True, he said, in sciences, if we put this in the textbooks, I would be happy with this. He said, in science's pecking order, evolutionary biology lurks somewhere. There you go. He wrote, well done. He said, in science's pecking order, evolutionary biology lurks somewhere near the bottom, far closer to phrenology than to physics. And I'm just like, gee, for a change, I actually agree with him. Now, that quote wasn't in his book, Why Evolution is True. It was in his essay of Vice and Men. Because some of his evolutionary colleagues said something that he was deeply embarrassed by and was like, look, actually, your colleagues got it right if you believe in evolutionary theory. They wrote something about, well, since we're family friendly, I won't talk about it. You can Google Thornhill and Palmer and all the controversy they stirred. And Jerry Coyne was deeply concerned that it would give evolution a bad rap. And so he wrote that essay. He was lamenting evolutionary biology lurks somewhere near the bottom of science's pecking order. So that raises the question, what should be at the top? What should be the primary things that we would celebrate as scientific accomplishments and important for furthering, moving forward in science? I would think things like basic mechanics, chemistry, and then electromagnetic theory. How about celestial mechanics? We can predict positions of planets
respond. I think
1,000 years in advance or 1,000 years in the past,
sure.
down to
I can
maybe
respond to
even
this. I
now.
think. Yeah, yeah. So I have a response to this, and the tragedy is that it's going to be one of the pieces of my response, and I'm worried that I'm then not going to be able to state the other pieces of it. So I hope in the future I have the opportunity to come back around
Sure.
and talk about other aspects of this. But like there's this thing that seems to be implicit in the way that you're treating like what we should teach in science that I find as a science teacher horrific. Like actually like getting me internally like stomach achy, sort of heart beating fast. And that is that the only criterion we should have for what we teach is what is most useful. Is that is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't say only, but how are you going
Okay.
to have time? How can we have enough time to focus on, I mean, the things that are useful? There's so much science that could fill out multiple lifetimes. And uh, so, like, this is what happened to medical doctors who don't believe in evolution. They had to study way more stuff. I mean, I was in a conference with Dr. Michael Egnor, who is he is a professor of brain surgery, and he's an ID proponent, obviously. I don't know if he's a creationist, but when he was giving lectures on his work, I was just like, how do you have time to, you're trying to save people's lives. I can totally understand why he wouldn't have time for speculative theories such as evolutionary biology. Uh, so I'm not saying that we only teach that, but I'm just like, okay, how much time are you going to allot to it? Uh, the basic sciences are hard enough uh, to gain mastery of, and it's only going to get harder because the more we discover how to apply it. So, you
So what
know,
am I?
I
So if what's another criterion then for on which we should use to determine what we teach as part of science? How we design the science curriculum?
okay. So even theories that I would disagree with, like evolutionary theory, teach it to the extent that so much biological literature, I would say, has been poisoned by evolutionary thinking that in order just to be able to get by to understand the language, go ahead and learn it. So I have no problem with saying, look, you may not like the verbiage here. People will disagree with it, but you got to learn it. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with it. Hopefully that'll change. Hopefully they'll stop, you know, we have sort of a movement where in the ID community, we want to drop as much evolutionary verbiage from biology as we, can, because I think we'll clarify things, and we're a long way from that. But in the meantime, I think it's very important that creationists at least know the terminology. And
So
so I wouldn't
I'm hearing
say
you say as a secondary
it's useful.
criterion for this that
It is useful in that sense so that they could advance and kind of deal with what I think is the poisoning of their reasoning by prejudicial language. And so I'm not going to, I'm not here to say, okay, how much time as a science teacher would you spend on this? Um, you know, I think it is very telling, though, that you have very accomplished biologists who are pioneering work that don't believe in evolutionary theory, or practicing physicians or biomedical people. That should be very, getting them. The other thing is, this is very bad for science if you're prejudicing, if you're discouraging people because they feel like they're being marginalized.
yeah,
That is very bad,
yeah.
and that you're being targeted in academia to be thrown out if you don't hold to a certain viewpoint where the data isn't actually confirmed. Um, you know, I'll give you a good example. Robert Matheny is obviously a creationist. I don't know if he's a young Earth creationist. He had an FDA approved procedure to regrow heart valves. He's a cardiac thoracic surgeon. He's saving lives. What if someone like that was suppressed um, because he felt his viewpoint was being prejudiced against? And then, um, so I don't know what his upbringing was or whatever, but I think that'd be a terrible that would be really terrible for society. So I'm not saying let's not study evolutionary theory. We have to do it in a way that we have to be considerate of what people's beliefs are. And until evolutionary theory is at the level of well-established sciences, such as the ones that I showed on the screen there on the 5 pillars of physics, then just say, look, there's this is historical stuff. There's disagreement, and it's not at the level of what we call operational science. Operational science is repeatable. You can observe it in the present day. Origin science is not, and people can have room to disagree. This is the prevailing theory, and I'm fine with that.
I want to call attention to an imbalance that's happening in our conversation right now. I feel like for every one thing that I'm able to respond to, you're proposing 2 or 3 new things to talk about, and I don't know how to like. I want to I disagree with everything that you're saying right now, and I love you, and I want to talk about these things and have a good conversation with them, but I don't know how to right now.
Okay, okay. This is what sometimes happens, is that in order for me to explain things, I go into multiple details.
Yeah.
So this is probably, let's try to make it a little bit more balanced here. So we can rewind a little bit. So you asked me, should we only teach the things as a science educator that are useful? And I'm like, well, how about we prioritize the things that are immediately useful? I don't know how to. It's perfectly fine to put out theories there that that may not be immediately useful, but that is more of your job, I guess, to figure out how we do the balance. Because anytime you have something that isn't immediately useful and proven experimentally, there's a risk that the idea could be wrong. And that's especially true in origins theory.
So I think I can try to respond to that. Um, I'll first say that, of course, sorry, let me actually first say that I totally agree with you that it's very bad in teaching science if students feel like they're being marginalized for their beliefs. This is part of what I am trying to do. This is part of the mistake that I think has been made with in teaching science, that this ends up coming across as if you don't believe in this, you should not consider science to be yours. I feel like the downstream effects of this include some very bad things for evangelical Christianity, where evangelical Christianity has begun to see the scientific profession as totally their enemies, which I'm not saying that there's no truth there, but I also think that there's some really bad things about like sort of that perception in this. There's bad blood, there's bad juju between those communities, and I think that is in part because of exactly what you're referring to here. And I think as an educator and as a schoolmaker, it is part of my job to help end that. Part of what I'm trying to do with these conversations is I call it guerrilla science in my head, in the same way that you have like guerrilla gardening, where people will start planting flowers on public places, roundabouts or whatever, just to beautify their local environment. I am big on guerrilla science, guerrilla philosophy of just engaging people in their everyday lives on matters of great importance, and that is yeah. That's something that I want to use to help improve the whole situation there. So let me just say that that's something I agree with. Now, something that I disagree with, of course, is how sure we are of evolution. You and I differ radically on that, and I want to make sure that I'm not. If I didn't agree, I want to make sure that I'm stating this, lest anyone thinks that we're in agreement about that. But of course, that is the reason that we were having these conversations, and we can talk about that and the our Bayesian posterior that we should have on the mainstream belief about evolutionary theory of various sorts and an old Earth and all of this thing, right? But that I want to cut that away from what we're talking about right now, because you wanted to talk about with this, you wanted to talk about what are the criteria we should use to determine which we include in the science curriculum, because you're saying that it shouldn't be taught very much. And here's something where I feel like we probably have a big difference, but maybe not. So Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, in maybe, I don't know, one of the first Sherlock Holmes books, definitely one of the original Sherlock Holmes stories. Holmes, who knows so much about everything and uses that to solve crimes, Holmes forgets whether the sun revolves around the earth or the earth revolves around the sun. And Watson and maybe somebody else finds this ridiculous, and he says, but look, what use is that to me? That's just a fact that's like out there about the universe. That does not help me in any way solve crimes. My life will never have any difference if I see that the earth is falling around the sun, or that the sun is a tinier, much tinier thing that's rising and going around our planet. I feel like that is a good example of a really extreme criterion for we should only teach the things that are useful. Teaching there is a bit different. He's not saying about schools or whatever. But if someone were to say, well, I think Holmes is right, and because of that, I don't think, I think that we should, just say like geocentrism, heliocentrism, right? Like, what do scientists even believe these days? Like, I don't even know. Now they're saying that the sun is in the center of the universe. They're saying that's, first they thought that the center of the galaxy was, and now they think there are other galaxies, and there is no center, and that idea, blah, 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 blah. Like, so this is too complicated. Let's not even include this. That would be like, that feels like letting the strongest person I know punch me as hard as they can in the intestines. Because part of what motivates science is not just some sort of technocratic, let's figure out how to save more lives, right? By understanding the human body better, how to save more lives by electrifying Africa, right? And getting better technology into people's homes, right? These are, I don't mean to demean utility. I think utility in science is so big. But there's always also been in science, which grew out of philosophy, right? We used to call it natural philosophy. There's this enchantment in reality, or enchantment of reality, that says, what are the biggest things that are going on in the universe? What is this world really? Carlo Rovelli, who the Italian physicist, who I'm just going to tell you the truth. It was a major mistake to organize these books by color. I could never find any of the books that I want right now when I'm looking for them. Carlo Rovelli wrote a really good book on Anaximander, who in some important ways really kicks off modern science after Thales. And Anaximander is the first person to say that the world is not flat. And there's no utility in this at all. But humans are interested in like what is real. And so this is why. So now I'm just maundering. This is why I react the way that I do toward the idea that, like evolution isn't, even if I thought that evolution isn't useful at all, and I don't think that. Even if I thought that way, I could not agree with excluding it or severely diminishing it from the school curriculum, which I'll point out. It's not like anyone is saying, at least I'm not saying that like 100% of the school science curriculum should be evolution. I teach a really evolutionarily infused science curriculum, where I also teach Faraday's. I also teach Maxwell's equations. I also teach all of these other things, and I think I do so in a way that is much better than most science teachers teach, right? Because this is like the thing that I've dedicated my life to finding new and better ways of explaining this sort of thing. And I'm in a very privileged position where I get to teach online classes and as opposed to live classes, blah, 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 blah. I'm dumber. Also, my privilege is that I'm stupider than most science teachers are, and the stuff does not come natural to me in the way that it does to them. So in order to teach it to them, I need to learn it in this way that idiots can understand. to explain to students, I need to explain to myself first, and yeah, so that, um, but so like I would say like even still like maybe 20% of my lessons at all, which are disproportionately well, which are of all sorts of different science topics, even mention evolution. And then when they mention evolution, like they're not primarily about evolutionary theory. They're using that to explore like this very specific thing as it exists in the huge picture of life, the universe, and everything. So, okay, yeah, sorry. So go ahead and react to any or all of that.
Okay, so uh, I have to modify something I may have said, or in light of what you just said, or the implication. Things that are of immediate utility are verifiable. So if it has utility, it has verification. Now, you can have things that are verified, but they're not of immediate utility. So the primary thing is verifiability. Verifiability. Evolutionary theory is not verifiable in so many things, like protein evolution, Darwinian selection, as the cause for major features. We do see it happen in antibiotic resistance, but it doesn't explain the origin of major protein families. People that work in this know it's deeply problematic. I don't know if you saw the thread on the Reddit forum where I said Michael Lynch said natural selection is expected to favor simplicity over complexity, and I'm like, gee, that's the total reverse of what Darwin claimed and what most evolutionary biologists believe. Now, Michael Lynch is an eminent. I'd rank him number 2 evolutionary biologist on the planet. And for him to say that, and then also with Masatoshi Nei saying Darwin never proved his theory, I'm just like, okay, I find that really, really problematic as far as if you're going to claim evolution is good science. So this is an example where something is not verifiable, even by the admission of evolutionary biologists. So if something is not verifiable, you can categorize it, but how much are you going to spend? So with the thing with Sherlock Holmes, the example, the sun, is it heliocentric or geocentric? That actually has relevance. It may not be immediately beneficial to Sherlock Holmes, but if society had not adopted the heliocentric viewpoint, we would not have GPS. So you might say, oh, I don't really need to care whether it's geocentric or heliocentric. And I talk to people who are flat earth geocentrists and just like, yeah, I wanted to tell them, okay, it may not be of obvious utility to you, but then what about, do you use GPS to get around where you are? What about all the navigation? We would not have, it's the fact that it's verifiable, and historically, the fact that we became heliocentric contributed to the idea of celestial mechanics. And then that began to connect with all the Newtonian mechanics. And because of that, we have celestial mechanics. We can put GPS satellites in geosynchronous orbits. I'm just like, okay, you may not see, Sherlock Holmes may not see the immediate connection, but it definitely has utility to society. Maybe the connection isn't obvious to him personally. So I'm not saying that it has to have direct, obvious utility to an individual person, but in terms of its contribution to overall science, it's absolutely is historically important. And we wouldn't, if we had a geocentric universe, we wouldn't be able to, if we still believe that, we wouldn't be able to put geosynchronous satellites like GPS satellites in orbit. So
Sure.
I'm not saying that utility is the ultimate. I would say verifiability is the ultimate. However, utility, if we're going to pick, okay, let's say we have all these verifiable facts. How do we prioritize which ones we're going to talk about? I would say utility is kind of a good heuristic to say, okay, let's just start there. So, I mean, I have like, we can now, stuff that is verifiable. The problem I have with evolutionary theory is it's not verifiable in its major claims. We can say, oh, antibiotic resistance, but even creationists believe in that. But we can't verify We can't even verify natural selection did this or that. I mean, I have this in evolutionary textbooks. So if you can't verify the mechanism, then well, what do you have except just a faith belief, and that's still fine.
So a
And that's
couple of
why,
things. Can
yeah,
I
go ahead.
respond to that? So I want to again just say that we disagree about. We have different beliefs at the moment about of how well established evolutionary theory is. I think evolutionary theory is insanely well established. I hear all the things that you're saying. I think that you're misinterpreting them. These are things that we should talk about, right?
Sure,
Not at this moment. We're talking about something else right now.
sure.
But those so specific two quotes about Darwin wasn't able to prove evolutionary theory and the simplicity over complexity thing, right? Like those in no way are problematic from my understanding of evolutionary theory. So we should talk about that at some point in the future.
Sure.
I really appreciating you say that your example of the heliocentrism allowed us to have GPS and a lot of other things like Newtonian theory, right? Newton theories. We might still here. If I can just like yes and you, we might still have Aristotelian physics if if we were still thinking that the Earth was the center of the universe and the sun was just a little ball that was going around it. Newton required understanding the planets and how they moved to make sense of things that are here on Earth. So I really appreciate that. I
Thank you.
I hear you saying that you think that we should prioritize that what really matters is verifiability in scientific ideas, and then among those, so that's how we should determine what to teach, and among that, we should probably focus on things that are utilitarian, that are useful for us. Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious as to how you would answer a question, and this is not the majority of why I think that evolution should be taught, but I'm curious as to how you answer a question like, say that there's a totally useless scientific fact. Just imagine that we could agree on one. I'm not sure. I doubt that such a thing exists, frankly, but let's just imagine that there is. But that fact expands our imagination of the universe immensely. That it is like we all agree, like wow, like this fact like gives us like existential purchase on reality. It causes us to imagine our place in the universe in a different way. My goodness, did we ever labor in falsehood before this understanding? But then when somebody comes along and says, how is that useful? We both of us just scratch our heads for 5 minutes. Would you say that such a thing that you and I were both 99.99 something percent sure is true, that thing should get no mention in the science curriculum, or that it should actually have like some important thing, some important role in the science curriculum?
It depends on what level. It really
Okay.
depends on, are we talking first graders? Are we talking PhDs who might be taking classes? So historically, the example would be Michael Faraday again. A woman asked him, well, what good is electricity? Because he was doing research. And understandably, the woman was like, well, what use is it? What good is electricity? Michael Faraday wisely said, well, madam, what good is a baby? And of course, we know where that all went. So I'm not saying we can't ever mention it. I'm just saying, look at all the science that, okay, if we had rewound all the way back to the ages of Aristotle, then definitely there was so little to study in science. Probably all the known science could probably fit in the book. Now, there's just no way we could fit all the verified science in one book. And definitely, we can't fit it in an entire 12 grade school curriculum. It's not my problem to decide, what we prioritize, but I think any speculative theory that is not verified has to at least be contrasted with things that we accept. And what I have problems with evolutionary theory is that it doesn't match up with the laws of physics. Some of the things that they claim are just like you just as soon believe in miracles. I happen to study protein biology. And I'm like, none of the stuff that you say could just happen makes any statistical sense from what we understand of condensed matter physics. So I'm like, okay, um, do we want to? I'm not saying we don't mention evolutionary theory. I think we should mention it. It is the dominant viewpoint among biologists. I'm fine with that. But you might want to ask the question, does it square with physics? And has anyone shown that? And I know evolutionary biologists are bothered by the fact that their theory doesn't seem to agree with physics. They can't seem to make it. I know that they say things like that, and I know a lot of physicists that say, well, it won't work. We understand physics. It doesn't square with physics. So um, I don't hold evolutionary biology to the level of fact. That's the fundamental problem.
Yeah.
I I think it conflicts. I think it contradicts well-established sciences, just like the ones I showed in my list. That's why I'm deeply passionate. I said, even if you're not a Christian creationist, Fred Hoyle was an avowed atheist. He ripped into evolutionary theory. He's the one who came up with the junkyard in a
Yeah.
tornado. That was not a creationist. Creationists have repeated it, but it was an atheist who said that. And so this is I think this is where I'm hitting the nail on the head. I do not think evolutionary theory is a fact. I don't think it agrees with physics.
Yeah.
And Fred Hoyle is a good example. Now, I'm fine with putting out speculations. And if there are useless facts right now, I don't think we should trivialize them as facts because we don't have immediate utility. Because Michael Faraday showed, I mean, that was I believe that was a real exchange, even if it's apocryphal. It's beautiful, what good is electricity? Said the woman, and he said, "Madam, what good is a baby?" Good on Faraday. If that really happened, that's awesome.
Well,
So
there's also
I'm
the
not
story of
saying
him being asked by the prime minister, "What good is this?" And he says, "I do not know, but I am assured that at some point you will find a way to tax it." Which is also probably apocryphal, but like it's look at some point they're just so apocryphal that like they're true, right? I think we can all just agree that like we just go back and we edit that and this is what we make. Can I? So I'm hearing you say that there's not much of a focus that you would give to things that are beautiful and existentially compelling that are not useful. Is that correct? Maybe in
for the
graduate
great
school classes, but not like first grade.
for the high school level,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean,
Great.
because
Okay.
okay, I'll just tell you just from a practical standpoint, it
Yeah.
bothers me we have generations of people now entering college that can't do eighth grade math.
Sure. I mean, I would say that part of the reason that they don't know how to do eighth grade math is, well, I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of them is that specifically we have taken this approach to math that just says, well, like how is this going to be useful? And that is historically part of why we teach math badly. And that when you find, I have some friends who run an outfit called Math for Love. They're amazing. And they have had amazing success in working with elementary and middle schoolers over the summer uh, who hate math and are terrible at it. And their first step is to get them to see the magic and beauty in math. And then they want to get good at it. I think the same thing is true of science. I feel like we have this very utilitarian, diminished view of what science is. That's actually the part is the cause of why people do not know it very well. So this is, I think, here. I think we have stumbled upon what is a real disagreement between the two of us. That for me, science should be approached not just as engineering, or fodder for engineering. I'm using that phrase. Feel free to disagree with it. But something I'm hearing utilitarianism is what I'm meaning to connote with that, but also as one of the essential branches of the humanities. So we disagree about that, and that's great. We can probably put that aside. I don't know that there's anything particularly to be gained from more conversation about that. But I think that it would be maybe more useful for us to. In the interest of not leaving our listeners with the assumption that because I haven't responded to any of the things that you've said that I agree with those things or do not have responses to that thing, is it okay if I tick off two small things
Oh,
that I disagree with, but
you
then I
have the
think they'll
floor.
push us on to other things. Um, Uh, one of the reasons that I'm excited to talk with you is because in the past, whenever I've heard people say evolutionary theory doesn't line up with the laws of physics, they've been people like Ken Ham, right? And then the explanations that are given for that are really garbage explanations that I can blow out of the water, while also sneezing and writing a poem. Really bad things. From you, I look forward to better explanations of that. So right now, my best attempts to understand that have led me to think that, no, of course, evolutionary theory lines up with the laws of physics. I know you're saying you're quoting people from this. I would love to make that the focus of something that we were talking about in the future. If I believed as you believe on this, then I too would probably think that evolution should not be included in the curriculum or whatever. But it is because of our factual disagreement on this, which is that we are different big picture things here, which is great. This is why we're meeting. And the other thing is the heliocentrism, marginalized for beliefs, criteria, is evolution one of the fundamentals? Now, I don't remember what it was.
Oh, before I forget,
Yeah.
there's one thing we actually agree on.
No.
So
What is it? I mean, we were in lots of things, but what are you thinking of?
I nearly lost my faith when I was raised a Roman Catholic, then became evangelical. But it was the evangelical culture in particular that I was nearly driven out of the faith because of their hate of science. There is a book, uh, Failure of the Evangelical Mind.
The
I think,
tragedy. It's by Mark Knoll. The scandal.
yes,
Yeah,
Scandal of the Event. I thoroughly agree with it.
yeah,
Even as a card carrying creationist, I'm not welcome in the church. It's like, no, we'd rather have something more spiritual talked about. And you're treated like a second class citizen. Even among some of people at church a congregation I was a part of, they just hated science. They, they,
For our
this
listeners
is
who
this,
haven't read that book or haven't heard about that book, you should know that the title is this delightful sort of play here, where the scandal of the evangelical mind, according to Wheaton historian of a religion, Mark Knoll, is that there is not much of an evangelical mind. Okay,
the
great.
intellectual. Okay, so what has happened, I mean, Roman Catholics have been, and also some of the evangelicals, namely the Presbyterians, not the Baptists. So theologically, Baptists and Presbyterians, they are aggregated as evangelicals, but there's definitely a cultural difference.
Yes.
Definitely.
Even when the Baptists are Calvinists, there's such a cultural difference.
Okay, so the scandal of the evangelical mind, they felt culturally, if you're not out there being an obnoxious evangelist, which many of them are, um, you're less of a Christian. Science, I've never. A lot of churches didn't want me talking about creationism. I was at an intervarsity meeting and they said, "Don't ever criticize Darwin again." I'm just like, okay, I see
Yeah,
what's going on.
yeah.
So, um, uh, I agree with you that evangelicalism has actually caused a lot of hatred of science. Um, and people are going to get mad at me for saying this, but I think it needs to be said. I think a lot of evangelicalism is a scam built around built around personality cults, especially the mega churches, and it's like you're sucking people's you're just draining them of their resources and their attention to build it around a personality cult. And what takes second priority is actually building people's lives and whatever they're gifted in. And that would include even people who are interested in science. And I, you know, I go, I've been visiting one particular congregation, not one mention about, try to be excellent in your study of science or whatever you do.
Huh.
You're just kind of like demeaned. And one pastor recently, and I'm going to call him out on it. He said, "What you focus on, Sal, is tangential and fringe. I was really offended. So here's the
Obviously.
thing
Yeah.
that I'm trying to share with Christians and evangelicals about creation, and I get that treatment from the pastor. What you talk about is tangential and fringe. We're out there to preach the gospel. I'm just like, look, so um, what about all the? I said, and I didn't say this to his face, but I did tell it to others. I said, I'll never recommend any of my friends who are Christians to go to this church because, especially if they're science students, because I see how you're going to treat them. You're going to treat them like what they do is fringe and tangential. You don't welcome them. And so, if you've sensed that there's been an anti science bent in evangelicalism, not the Presbyterians, but the Baptists, except for James Tour, I would tend to agree. So James Tour is a Jewish Baptist guy, and I'm amazed, but I guess where he lives, about all the churches you can go to are Baptist. I think if he were in another city, that would probably be different. He wouldn't be Baptist. So that's my
There's
feeling.
some
That's the
great
one
Baptist
thing
churches.
I agree
I've
with
been part of some healthy, good, excellent Baptist churches. Just want to defend Baptists for a minute there.
and I've not been a part of many good ones that I can think of. I've regretted every one that I've been to. I know that sounds so mean, but so
True.
I said, there's one, I mean, actually on my list of notes, I had it here. You said one thing that I really, we're, and this is how I represented what you said, evangelical culture bad for science. That's how I wrote it when you were talking about
Sure.
guerrilla
Sure. Yeah.
science.
Yeah.
If I misquoted you, my apologies,
No, no, it's good.
but
It's good.
certainly that is my sentiment, at least. Evangelicalism culture has been bad for science, especially for scientists who are evangelical. It's been horrible. I've had a horrible experience being in evangelical churches. So people will say, "Oh, why did you persist?" And I'm like, "Well, our theology agreed. I just didn't like the culture." So I can certainly agree with, okay, in the science side, there's certainly people I would agree, their physicists would agree with me in terms of the basic laws of physics, but I wouldn't necessarily get along with them. Just like I didn't get along with a lot of engineers, even though we would agree on science. So we actually have something to agree on, and I would like to see evangelical culture change. It's
Well, I
it's
really
bad.
appreciate you bringing like this back to the larger question of intellectual culture, not just science, because this is something that I think evangelicalism has always been weak on. I can cite Mark Knoll here. I'm not making this accusation from without in any kind of mean way. And it could be better with, and it would be so great. It'd be so great if it was better with it, because the intellectual life is a wonderful life. It's not the only life. It's not the only calling that people can have, but it's an adventure. It's a scary adventure. It's a wonderful adventure. And, too often you see evangelicals, and to be clear, not just evangelicals and not just Christians, lots of people, but lots of people afraid of thinking, afraid of having open, real conversations about things that matter. And this is, I mean, for me, another reason that I engage in this is because I'm a schoolmaker. This is the thing that I am called to do in the universe. And the question of how do you make schools that are fit for humans runs right through the question of how do you set all minds on fire with a love for the world, a love both to act in the world, care for the world, but also to understand the world. And that's something that I feel like I can be of use to evangelicals for, even from without. Winston Churchill, right, once said to his brother-in-law or something like that, "You, my dear," let's just imagine it was Tom. "You, my dear Tom, are like a pillar of the church. You support it from within." I really got to work in my Winston Churchill voice. "I am like a buttress. I support it from without." And like I still harbor this love toward Christianity and toward evangelicalism, though I'm not an evangelical, nor am I a Christian at this moment in my life. And I think that good things should be supported, and that they should be improved. And sometimes there is a privileged position that one can have from the outside, where one can help support them, help improve them from the outside. That is actually hard to do on the inside. I've got nothing to lose. from evangelicals, right? You do, and you are still a straight shooter who is really critical of a lot of evangelical institutions.
Well,
But I can move more freely in some ways.
well, if I may, I mean, I'm speaking from personal experience, and people know this, by the way, sort of shameless plug. I was in a documentary about the evangelical church. I was a plaintiff in a lawsuit against an evangelical pastor
Oh,
for
wow.
bilking, I think, in my view, illegally routing millions, if not tens of millions.
Wow.
So visit therealdavidplatt.org, therealdavidplatt, Platt
Good.
dot
Two T's at
org.
the end. I was going to ask about
If you
that.
want to see this, and you will see how I've sensed this brewing for a long time, that I think a lot of these guys are just actors, and they're virtue signalers, and then they'll preach the poverty gospel and line their pockets with millions.
I
And
don't know if
so
this is
visit
helpful.
that. And
Sorry.
I'm sorry to say that if people who might be on my side of the issue are saying, why are you dissing evangelicalism? It's because now I've actually, having gone through this lawsuit and then looking at legal records, if you saw the billions that you're being scammed, it's like, okay, I can totally see how evangelicalism has tried to focus on personality cults and perpetuating institutions that really don't help society. I'm so sorry to say that. I think it's something that needs to be said. I can say it because I am a Christian evangelical, but I don't like the culture. I've seen the ugly side of this. I've seen people go to jail over this, which I'm actually kind of happy for, that they actually went to jail. And I think more need to be thrown in jail for all their money theft of the congregations and people who are giving in good conscience. So I've seen a lot of evil, and I'm tired of seeing it. And I've seen it sadly where I see people who study science and defend science and promote science being marginalized. So better that someone like me say it on your channel than you, because maybe I would be listened to by my fellow Christians.
Well, this is one of the things I appreciate that you. I mean, look, like there's some way in which it's ridiculous that what you're saying is in any way controversial, right? And what other circumstances do people say, yes, we want scam artists to be running major institutions, right? It's only because of this natural human predisposition toward being tribal that these scam artists are able to get their defenders, even as they hurt the very people who are defending them. And this is the sort of thing that when people make this accusation, exactly as you're saying, from the outside, it seems like it's another tribal attack, and oftentimes it is. And this is why we need to detribalize things, so people can be more rational and help themselves better. This is the sort of thing that Jesus warned about, right? Wolves among sheep. I don't know if this next thing that I'm going to say is helpful for you helping triangulate sort of where I am. But another little fun project that I'm taking on right now with a Catholic friend is to look into the Shroud of Turin, which, growing up as a good Protestant, I always thought was a lot of crap. For your viewers who don't know about this, in the 1100s, there was found this piece of linen, that very big piece of cloth that was claimed was the burial wrapping of Jesus. Has a face on it, has some handprints sort of on it. As a good Protestant, I always looked at this and said, that's obviously a fake. That's obviously a fake. But, all my Catholic friends look at this and like, oh, it's probably real, right? So I'm engaging in a local dialogue here at my local Catholic coffee shop with a good Catholic friend about this. And the reason that I am so excited to be engaging with him about this is, one, this is just really fun for me. But two, it is important to teach Christians how to be skeptical of claims that people are making in their community. Because if you don't have that, you just get a ton of scamsters. The wolves win when you let those muscles atrophy. So that's right. This is part of my hope, is to be able to make Christianity better because of this. And even like from the apologetic side, right? Like I want to help make Christian apologetics better by, like taking the Ken Ham level, bottom shelf young earth creationist argument and just help young earth creationists see these are terrible arguments. These do not withstand 15 seconds of scrutiny by anybody who knows about these things. In some of these circumstances, these people are lying to you about the evidence. I want better people to argue with. So it is in my self-interest to help make young earth creationist in any kind of creation apologetics better by this. Hey, I've got to go in 2 minutes. Let's do our kind of wrap up here at the end of all things. Sal, at the end of all things. Sorry, I just started watching the Lord of the Rings movies with my kids last night. Pretty fun time in the old Hendrickson household. Where do you want to go next with this?
I think I was surprised how much agreement we had, at least on evangelicalism, if anything.
We always do.
And I'm sorry to have to say that about my own tribe, but I've been, that lawsuit that I was involved in cost us $250,000 out of our pocket. I mean, this was painful. We had no expectation of any compensation because we asked the judge for equitable relief, which means no financial compensation. We just wanted financial records released and contracts. So I just needed to clear my name on that. So where we would go next, I had said that my study of physics tells me that evolutionary theory in its major claims it doesn't agree with physics. And this would be a great way to explore physics, by the way, because we'd probably talk more about physics and probability theory. I would also be interested in how you would like to teach math, because I think math is very important to understanding the problems. And I'm not the first to have said this. It's probably more interesting to look at what the atheists like Fred Hoyle and people in the Y-Star Convention, who are definitely not creationists. I try to cite non-creationist sources. So if you would be interested in reviewing evolutionary literature and physics, then I think that would be a good learning exercise. We're going, evolutionary biologists versus evolutionary biologists versus physicists. And I think I could be of service to you to see, even if you will not agree in the end, you at least see it from my perspective.
But I might agree in the end, right? This is one of the things one of the reasons that I'm doing this is to keep my mind open toward all of these things. I don't think it would be hard for you to convince me at all that we don't have a good model of how evolution actually works. I'm not saying that I'm close to believing this, but I think that if the evidence is good enough here, I think that I could very quickly be converted to how evolution works is a great mystery and all of our theories are crap.
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't I, okay, because I published in this area, so I had to be knowledgeable of evolutionary. By the way, I recently got approval from an editor. There's going to be secular editor. Good outfit, by the way. I'm happy to share from evolutionary literature, and it would be stuff that I think would be fair for you in the classroom to share.
Sure.
Because you're here, evolutionary biologist, you'll have the opportunity, if you're wanting some torture, to bring this up on certain subreddits and Reddit and say, is this can I teach this in class? I'm going to be very interested how they'll react.
Sure. I mean, I'm teaching the way that we organize our science curriculum. Am I sharing my screen right now? I think that I am.
Yes.
This is from the website sciencesweird.com. If you go to sciencesweird.com/everything, you see the whole way that we teach everything. I think that one of the major problems of science is that science is taught too disciplinarily. So you're only caring about physics things when you're in a physics class, and then you don't care about chemistry things there. I think that you need to understand the tapestry of the universe, think about all of these things all of the time. And so we go by topic, and the topics are chosen to, kind of align up with physics or chemistry, anatomy, earth science, biology, and zoology. But like when we talk about snails, we are also talking about chemistry. When we are talking about apples, we're also talking about, well, that was a weird one. Chemistry, definitely, physics also. Um, and all of these things. This is the end of, we're approaching the end of year 3 right now. So I'm about to start this next week teaching our Hills class, which is our sedimentary geology and age of the earth class, which is so exciting. Ugh. It's my favorite topic of all of the 36 topics. But then at the end of this year, we're doing evolution. So I can imagine at the very least that I could incorporate some of the things, some of the challenges that you are citing from evolutionary biologists or evolutionary theorists into the curriculum. I can't promise anything right now without having seen these things and all that, but like I'm interested in that. So why don't you do this, Sal? Could you send me, I don't know, stuff that I can read from however many sources that you want, from like, but good evolutionary, good non-creationists. They can be atheists, they can be theists, whatever. That are challenging to that you think are challenging to evolution, and I will read them, and I'll try to get my science advisor also to read them, so I can prepare for the conversation that we have next time.
Yes, yes.
Cool.
And
Thanks.
unfortunately, it's going to be a little bit fragmented, varying levels of accessibility. And sometimes I'll reference a popular article
Mhm.
that tries to make it for a general audience, which often links to the actual research. So you might get a mix where you'll have varying degrees. I would be very delighted to share that with you. Um,
The fun
Now
thing
you
that we
have
could do actually is, I'm sorry, go for it. Go for it.
one advantage because of I have Google AI. I don't use Chat GPT just because, I mean, I've used it, but it's just easier to just, sometimes Google will just give you general. You can actually see my interpretation, and I got a lot of flack on a certain subreddit on Reddit that I was code mining, and I said, look, you could take my interpretation and just query do Google AI, and it would most of the time it would agree with me. So I'm going to suggest certain Google AI queries that will also lead you to. I'll give you the literature links that
Sure.
I have, but sometimes it'll give you even more. And then you could also see if I'm how far out in left field am I extrapolating uh, what was actually written by the researcher, and most of the time I'm right in line with what they said. I'll point out where I disagree with them, obviously, and where I think some of their ideas don't square with even their own ideas in other literature. Um, and I would be happy to do that because I am right now in the middle of writing a booklet, 20 pages, Darwin's Dastardly Deception. And a lot of it will be drawing on what evolutionary biologists have said about Darwin's theory. And people might be shocked in the last 16 years, this is where it's really come out, where it's become very fair game to start criticizing Darwinian evolution. And then people say, well, you have all these other alternatives. Well, those other alternatives also fail, and that's another topic. But I will be happy to do that. I really want to thank you for, this is probably a difficult conversation for both of us to have, but I think we've moved forward and we had some areas to agree on, which is good. And probably the best thing is now we've at least agreed to continue the conversation. And I think that's the most important thing.
Yay! Go us. All right, Sal, thank you very much for this. Folks, thank you very much for this. See you all next time. Bye.